Olá, seja bem-vindo ao Campo Diplomático, espaço dedicado às relações do Brasil com o mundo. Eu sou Catiúcia Sotomayor e hoje converso com o embaixador da Itália no Brasil, Francesco Azzarelo. Formado em Economia e Comércio, ele já exerceu funções nas embaixadas do Irã e da Albânia, no consulado da Austrália e na representação permanente italiana nas Nações Unidas, nos Estados Unidos. Também foi embaixador da Itália nos Países Baixos e está no Brasil desde 2020. Signor Ambasciatore, è un grande piacere.
Olá, Catiúcia, grande prazer para mim. Olá, espectadores.
Mr. Ambassador, we can say that Brazil and Italy are linked in great commercial relations, right? For a long time right now.
Yes, well, I mean, Italy and Brazil have blood in common. We had the first flows of migration to Brazil were started in 1870, around that date. We have today about 32 million Brazilians of Italian origin. We have 640,000 Italian passport holders in Brazil. Italians love Brazil. I think Brazilians love Italians.
You're right.
So it's really a brotherhood relationship.
And what about agribusiness? What is the role of this theme in your country?
Well, agribusiness, as in Brazil, for Italy is a very important area of our economy. It's around 15% of Italy's GDP. To make a comparison with Brazil, Brazil is 23.5% of your GDP. But in Italy, agribusiness is also a matter of culture, of style. Italy in the past centuries was divided in a lot of states, so we had various traditions coming on. So this is agribusiness is with pharmaceutical items has been the only area not affected by the pandemic last year. It increased in terms of production exports, exactly as Brazil.
But we can say that Italy is well known for its amazing food and, of course, the wine. And what are the highlights of production? Can we say it's the grape or not?
Well, it's interesting maybe to know that Brazil imports 85% of its pasta from Italy. I would say that you should import 100% of your pasta in Brazil. And another interesting thing could be that wine, Italy is the first producer of wine of the world in terms of volume. We are the fourth exporters to Brazil. If I remember correctly, after Chile, Portugal, and Argentina. But we also like to remember that Italians have contributed to the excellent development of Brazilian wines and sparkling wines that you have especially in the south, where the big flows of the first Italian migration came. Where we also have a lot of canteens and big Brazilians of Italian origin producers.
So the Brazilian wine is almost Italian, we can say that, right?
Well, it has a good touch of Italian, a good touch, I think, also of Italian technology, because let's not forget that our two economies, I would say they are agribusiness especially. They have complementarities. So you export commodities, we transform them, we consume them, but there are a lot of areas in which we can develop in a more interdependent way the two areas.
Now you mentioned the technology. What can we say about this subject? Innovation, how does the country act on this theme?
Well, Italy has always been a country with huge investments in technology. Wine production in Italy, for example, or pasta, or oil production, machineries are very, very high level. Therefore, I think that Italy and Brazil could develop more in terms of sharing their business. Apart the fact that there are these differences in seasons. So when you produce fruits or vegetables in your summer that are not produced in Italy and vice versa. So we could work together much more and much better. We export a lot of technology to Brazil, but I think Brazil should profit, and we should do more partnerships, industrial partnerships, agribusiness partnerships, Italian investors coming here. We could be leading Brazil in markets in which Brazil is not present at the moment, and vice versa.
And even though we can say that Italy is a technological country, we know that more of, I don't know, 7% of the production is family farmer. Is that right?
Yes, well, so let's not forget that Italy is, in terms of surface, 1/28 of Brazil. Brazil is a continental, we call it, country, huge, even if I think 60% of your country is made of forests. So we have a need to be more concentrated. We don't have properties that are bigger than 100 hectares, but the backbone of the Italian economy, not only agribusiness, is apart some big companies, it's always medium, small enterprises. In terms of agribusiness, the majority are family-owned, less than 5 hectares, even one. Therefore, I wonder if it could be a model for Brazil, because you have these huge properties with few owners, but you have a huge population. You are 212 million. Italy is 60 million people. So there is space probably to develop small properties for families that need to work, that want to work, that don't have the financial means for investments, but that's obviously an internal political affair of Brazil.
But there is a way that we can repeat public policies of other countries. So do you think there is something there in Italy in this subject, in this matter, that we could try and repeat?
Well, absolutely.
Are there investments for the family farmers, for example?
Yeah. I think that as always in life, Italy can learn from Brazil and Brazil can learn from Italy. And modern learning, we could say maybe we could share our experiences. So for sure there could be some study may be made by Brazilians on the model, the Italian model in agrobusiness. Speaking of agrobusiness, I mean more than the industrial side, the property way that these lands are owned, what they produce, because you have a lot of productions that are similar to Italy, and then obviously you will have to do your own homework in Brazil and share, inform people, maybe
adapt.
Yes, and do some formazione, some training of people, but starting from the legal point of view. So to help smaller farmers to acquire land, to produce for their own business, but also for their own necessities, but also for the rest of Brazil, and maybe export.
Okay, still talking about this family business production, we can say that the production, for example, of the Mediterranean diet that is so famous there, it's something more organic and more family-based too, right?
Well, so the Mediterranean diet is very famous because it's considered very healthy, and because probably it uses also ingredients and gives you food that normally people like. Because I mean, the most classical Italian food, that is a plate of spaghetti al pomodoro, so with tomato and some basil on top, is the most simple thing that you can do, the most healthiest, and it uses products of the land, so good olive oil, good tomatoes. We eat a lot of bread, that's part of our, but let's say tomatoes, oil, some cheese. I love to think of your, because you have some excellent cheese from Minas that is very famous, that I know and I love, because from one side it seems a little bit like Parmigiano, so can be a little bit soft in terms of taste, but it also has some similarities with pecorino. Pecorino cheese in Italy is a strong taste that you can use with certain types of pasta.
You're talking about Minas, but you told me that there is something that you export here from Minas Gerais. Tell me about that, please.
Thank you. Well, it's another interesting thing to know is that Italy imports more than 50% of our coffee from Brazil. Because Italy doesn't produce coffee. What do? We transform it, we toast it.
And you drink a lot, like?
We drink a lot of coffee.
Espresso.
And we export coffee. I mean, Lavazza, Illy, trademarks that also in Brazil are very known. And of this 50% plus of coffee that comes from Brazil, around 25% comes from Minas. That is quite interesting. So Italians love coffee, but our coffee actually is mostly Brazilian.
That's amazing. And what about the biodiversity? How is Italy working with the fact that we have the climate change changing everything in agribusiness?
This is a more difficult question. I need my notes. Well, because I had to prepare myself, obviously, for this interview.
Thank you so much.
It was also very good for me. So in Italy, let's say, agriculture and livestock production are more and more oriented towards production of energy. They call it the agro-energy. And the provision of services aimed to protecting environment and its ecosystem, Italian ecosystem. Every year I learned that tens of tons of waste are used to produce renewable energy from biomass within the framework of the so-called circular bioeconomy. Italy is investing a lot in the production of biogas from farms, and this I think is very interesting from a general point of view. We have 1,600 plants producing biogas from agricultural waste, generating around 1 gigawatt, that is more or less the equivalent of a nuclear plant, of a modern nuclear plant. And the result of this biogas process, besides energy, is also a very useful natural fertilizer, which is cheaper and healthier than chemical fertilizers.
So that's also an example of how you use technology?
Absolutely, absolutely. I must say, and this is specific technology for agriculture, because in other areas, for various reasons, we need the help of other countries in order to distract our waste. But on the agricultural side, I think we are very well advanced.
And what can I say about the pandemic? How did it affect? You already told me that the agribusiness was not that affected, but when we think about the relations, the commercial relations with other countries, with Brazil, for example, how did it affect?
Well, let's say, from a general point of view, the pandemic is a tragedy. It's a tragedy for everybody, with social, psychological, economical, and financial effects. We have to get out of it as quick as we can, and that is a matter of vaccinating more population possible in the least time possible. But we are all part of the family of the world, so nobody can be out of this process of getting out of the pandemics. And for sure, commercial relationships are affected. We lack, for example, of the most basic thing, that is the human relationship, meaning missions of technicians, experts, politicians in one country or the other, so to go and visit, exchange, sign agreements. We are all in these video teleconferences that become terrible at a certain point. So it has been affected in real terms, but we have to use this time to invest, to study, and to build up for the future. And the future, we all hope that it will be quite soon.
And can we say that maybe with the agreement between Mercosur and the European Union, it can help to rebuild the economics of all the countries after the pandemic, for example?
Absolutely. EU-Mercosur would be the most important agreement ever signed in the world. There are some issues that are being discussed. Italy is a full supporter of the EU-Mercosur agreement, and I think that everybody will benefit from the agreement. For sure, 100% of people, you cannot have everybody happy. Also in Italy, we've had, as other countries maybe more, but we've had agricultural lobbies not happy of the EU-Mercosur agreement. But that was a political decision. The Italian government, after 20 years of negotiations, decided to sign the agreement to go on with the process of ratification. So we hope that the EU-Mercosur agreement will be completed, finalized, because it's a complicated thing to do in Europe. It has to go through the 27 parliaments, but the commercial side can go in place straight away. It's the political areas that have to go through the parliaments. So if we decide and sign and do the things so that the EU-Mercosur agreement can go in place straight away, everybody can benefit in different ways, but overall everybody can benefit. It's a benefit for everybody. It's a benefit for our populations, and we also have to look at things in a more wider way. It's opening to culture, it's opening to lifestyles, it's making populations know each other better, helping traveling, tourism. This is always in a very utopistic view of the world, of a world of peace, prosperity, and friendship.
But we can also say that the agri-tourism was affected.
For tourism in Europe, I think also in Brazil, except the internal tourism, pandemic has provoked a disaster. Tourism in Italy has suffered enormously. We are a country that lives a lot of tourism, as Brazil does. And one characteristic today of tourism is that people don't want to go anymore only to main capitals or cities. For example, in Italy, if you go to Italy, you have to go to Venice, Florence, Rome. I'm from Sicily, so you have to go to the south. That is fantastic and very different from the rest of Italy. But tourists want to have more specific experiences. That means, for example, you have some tourists that want to do sport itineraries. You have ones that want to do the wine itineraries. So you have the various canteens, you go and visit them, you taste the wine. Then in the evening, maybe you eat and drink more and go to bed. Hopefully the hotel is close to the restaurant. But for sure, tourism, agriculture, agrobusiness, agrotourism are concepts that are always more developed and people love them, I must say.
And what are the opportunities and the challenges that we have together?
Well, as I was mentioning, if we speak only of agrobusiness, the two countries have complementarities. I think that Brazil should incentive a little bit more specific types of investments, should give more, maybe a little bit more information. Not that you don't do the job, because you do it and you do it very well. The embassy in Rome is run very well. I know your ambassador very well. He's a very experienced and very skilled man. Your consulates in Italy work very well, also in terms of promoting economic and commercial relations. But Italians, I think, are a little bit afraid, except the big companies or other companies, and we have about 1,000 Italian companies here, not Brazilian of Italian origin companies. They are sometimes afraid of the distance, the bureaucracy, that is a problem in Italy, but also in Brazil.
Another thing that we have in common, right?
We have
the
a lot of things. We have
yes.
much more. We have a lot of marriages between Italians and Brazilians, so it's incredible. This is a difficult period because you cannot have a pure liberalization policy, and this government knows this very well. You also have to have some type of Keynesian policy, but you do have to try and open up the economy, maybe protecting at the beginning the areas that would be more affected from this opening. It's a characteristic, for example, of the agriculture in Europe, where we have this European Union common agricultural policy that is very protective. But we have a market of 426 million people, I think, with a very strong agricultural sector. So everybody's very afraid that if we open too much, then we'll have big imbalances. For sure, EU, Mercosur would affect some areas in Europe, in Brazil, but then we would have an equilibrium. And that, at the end of the day, the benefit would be wider than the smaller losses.
And today, what are the most important agreements, partnerships that Brazil and Italy share?
Well, in terms of agreements, we have agreements, I think, in all areas. We have a scientific agreement that is working well. There is a special situation in which the two countries are going to cooperate on joint scientific projects, and we are examining the two sides. Well, the Italian side is examining about 190 scientific Brazilian projects. In the pandemic, I would like to say we have one of the most important researchers of the world on pandemics. She's Italian, I think she's married with a Brazilian, and she works in a very important institute in Brazil. We have agreements in the military field, but military, let's not forget the military. What people don't know is that the huge investments that are made in technology in the military field, and Italy has one of the biggest industries in the world, they are indispensable for the civilian technology. And that gives the level of the country. So it's not what people think. I mean, military is useful in terms of defense, but also in terms of the technology to develop a country. We have cultural agreements. I mean, we have agreements of every type. The important thing in life is what are the follow-ups. So we have the agreement, we want to implement it. But there is goodwill and really good efforts on both sides.
Now, you got here in 2020. The middle of the pandemic. So what's your impression of our country?
I must be sincere. Before coming to Brazil, I've never been to Brazil, not even as a tourist. And I didn't speak Portuguese. When I arrived at the beginning of January last year, we had a couple of months that were okay. Then unfortunately the pandemic started, so I've been living in Brasilia, confined more or less between the office and my residence that are on the same level, luckily, with the same terrace. The negative aspect is that I have not traveled. I would love to be traveling, visiting the states, the Italian communities, the governments of the states, seeing Brazil. I have an idea of Brazil. I mean, I'll be watching TV, etc. And Brazil, from my point of view, is a fantastic country that probably also gives you very strong emotions, depending on where you go and what you see.
You have great expectations. So.
I have great expectations. The positive side the only positive side of the pandemic has been that I've been studying a lot for more than 1 year. So I've been studying economics, politics, etc. So I'm quite well prepared. I think I'm ready to devote more time to traveling than to being in the office in the embassy.
And with all this study, you told me that you are now trying to implement a new project in the embassy, right?
Yes, I must say I'm very proud. It's not, it's the work and the efforts of other people, not mine. It's about 10 years that the Italian embassy in Brasilia has been working slowly towards this liscio zero goal. We should have this ceremony where the Italian embassy in Brasilia would be the first embassy in Brasilia, but also in the world, to have a liscio zero certificate. We've been working very closely with the Brazilians, first helping to develop a local company with lorries that come and get the waste, different types of waste divided. And in our embassy we have been eliminating completely plastics, and we have our own waste system internally. We have solar panels. So it's a little grain of the sand contribution to Brazil and the world.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Grazie mille, signore ambasciatore.
Obrigado, Catiúcia. Obrigado a todos vocês.
E no Campo Diplomático de hoje, nós falamos sobre as relações comerciais entre Brasil e Itália, com destaque para o acordo entre Mercosul e União Europeia, a agricultura familiar, o vinho italiano e os produtos da dieta mediterrânea. Você pode rever este programa e também outras entrevistas no nosso canal no YouTube. Aproveite para seguir a gente nas redes sociais, @AgroMaisTV. Continue com a programação do AgroMais, seu canal voltado para o agronegócio, 24 horas. Obrigada pela companhia. A gente se vê.